The whole rule of forecasting was to make as many forecasts as possible and publicize the ones you got right. The new rule is to forecast so far into the future that no one will know you got it wrong. The super long view inspires some of the most influential forecasts of our time, which look back to the overwhelming economic might of China and India in the 17th century as evidence that they will re-emerge as dominant global powers in 2030 or 2050. In 1600, China accounted for more than 1/4 of global GDP and India accounted for just under 1/4. Though their shares have fallen dramatically since then, the super long view skips past the most recent years. The reasoning seems to be that the 17th century performance offers some guarantee of future results. Sweeping extrapolation has become a stable argument for the many companies, politicians, and high-profile public intellectuals who believe we are entering a Pacific century or even an African century. I recently reviewed a report from a major consulting firm forecasting that Nigeria could be one of the top 10 economies in the world by 2050. Well, yes, but almost anything could happen by 2050. The irony is that the extra long views have a growing impact even on Wall Street, where in general the way people think about time has become increasingly narrow, even breathless. For example, the average length of time that American investors, both large and small, hold stocks has been falling for decades, from a peak of 16 years in the mid-1960s to under 4 months today. At the same time, Americans and Europeans have been pouring money into emerging nations at a wildly accelerating pace, inspired in no small part by forecast for the year 2050. The amounts of funds flowing into emerging markets stock grew by 92% between 2000 and 2005, and by a staggering 478% between 2005 and 2010. Apparently, for many investors, it is inspiring to imagine that their investments are well grounded in the remote and the past and the distant future. But in the real world, it is not practical for investors or companies to tell clients to come back and check their returns in 40 years. Forecasts are valuable, indeed, and available for planning purposes, but it doesn't make much sense to talk about the future beyond 5 years, maybe 10 at most. The longest period that reveals clear patterns in the global economic cycle is also around a decade. The typical business cycle lasts about 5 years, from the bottom of one downturn to the bottom of the next, and the perspective of most practical people is limited to 1 or 2 business cycles. Beyond that, forecasts are often rendered obsolete by the appearance of new competitors, e.g., China in the 1980s, or new technologies, internet in 90s, or new leaders. In bracket, the typical election is also about 5 years, end bracket. The super long view is being popularized largely by economic historians and commentators and has become fabulously influential in business circles as well. But the reality is that the most CEOs still limit their strategic vision to 3, 5, or at most 7 years, and big institutional investors judge results based on 1, 3, and 5-year returns. As much as we all love the speculative titillation of futurology, no one can forecast the next century with any credibility, and more important, be held accountable for it. Today, we are at a very revealing moment. For the last half century, the early years of each decade saw a major turning point in the world economy and markets. Each began with a global mania for some big idea, some new change agent that reshaped the world economy and generated huge profits. In 1970, the money was for the top US companies like Disney, which had been the go-go stocks of the 1960s. In 1980, the hot play was natural resource, from gold to oil. In 1990, it was Japan, and in 2000, it was Silicon Valley. There were always a few doubters shouting from the wings, warning that other changes were overtaking the change agent, that spiking oil prices will self-destruct by strangling the world economy, that a patch of Tokyo real estate can be worth more than the entire state of California, that tech startups with zero earning can possibly justify stock prices in the four figures. But by this point in the mania, there were so many billions of dollars invested in the hot new thing that few people wanted to listen to the Cassandras. Most gurus and forecasters are willing to give people what they want, exotic reasons to believe that they are in with the smart crowd. The mania appears to make sense for a time until the exotic reasoning crumbles. In all, the post-war booms just cited the bubble went past in the first few years of the new decade.